and welcome to Property Mastermind podcast with Bob and Hillary, episode 85. This week we are talking how to work with a builder. We're going to talk through some things that you need to look out for and maybe some really good strategies on how to make your project, your property development, go really well by having a great relationship with your builder. So let's jump on into episode 85. Hello, episode 85. As I said, how to work with your builder. And giving away a copy of Property Millionaires Exposed again this week, going to Carson Bolt. Caught up with Carson the other day. Carson, interesting dude. Anyway, Carson, this is on its way to you. Remember, straight to page 121 about property development, but we don't have to tell you that. We know you're smart enough and you already know. Anyway, Bob, welcome to episode 85.
Thanks, Hillary.
Coming out on January the 26th.
Oh, is that Australia Day?
It is too. We should have thought of that. Australia Day. Happy Australia Day.
Australia Day.
Happy Australia Day. Straya.
Australia Day.
Yeah. Happy Australia Day.
Remember, I don't know, it could be 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
We had a real Australia Day because Georgia was over as well from New Zealand.
And Jono, yeah.
And we went to the... Storybridge Hotel, which always has a big deal, and we did the cockroach races.
We didn't even know that was a thing, that they have cockroach races in Australia.
Yeah, and all proceeds go to charity, of course. But we didn't win much that day, did we? For the charities.
Oh, that's so revolting. Those things. What's her name was there? The politician.
Yeah, she was there.
What was her name? The sort of red-headed lady.
Oh, that one. Yeah. No, she was there.
Okay, no one could remember her
name.
name.
Cockroaches. And all those other things. And remember, we bought kangaroo sausages, and we did all the
crocodile something,
all the T-shirt thing. It was just a funny old thing because here I was with 3 Kiwis on Australia Day, so I Australiaised everybody.
You did. We had a fun Australia Day. We even had, like, our dinner, we had Australian napkins, and we had party poppers. Yeah, it was all crazy stuff.
It's a funny old day. Anyway.
That's only because we had a few visitors over from the NZ. But anyway.
Yes, getting on well with your builder, how important is that?
Oh, it's like getting on well with your wife. Happy wife, happy life.
Happy builder, happy life.
Exactly.
Happy development, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you said that before, just before we kicked off on this podcast. You said the best developments you've ever had or ever done have been when you've had a good relationship with your builder. That's the tip number one.
Yeah. The best in terms of, like, enjoyment, I guess. Not necessarily the most profitable. That's not what I meant.
No.
By the best, but
the least amount of stress.
Well, the thing is, you're with the builder for a long period.
Like I said, happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, choose other consultant. The real estate agent that you buy the site from, it's a pretty short relationship. Yeah. And if it wasn't a good one, then you wouldn't get them to sell your product at the other end. And if it was, then you would. So that's okay. And I mean, even your other consultants, your architect, which, on something like where you're building duplex townhouses, yes, you're doing business with them for a while, but it's not a long while. And there's not much can go wrong in a way, in the respect that you would have gotten a fee proposal from your architect, you would have looked at other work they've done, you've discussed things, and then they come up with their first concepts, and you just sort of work with them on that. Not a lot of opportunity for getting into a bit of a dust-up. Structural engineer, those other people.
The relationships are a lot shorter.
Short and quite technical.
Yes.
But a builder...
Yeah, they're kind of more black and white. They're right or wrong.
Yeah.
Particularly
something like an engineer where they're just doing design. Yeah. Designing the footings, the slab, the bracing in the walls. I mean, that's
it.
Yeah, and you've gotten a fee proposal, so they can't sort of charge more, or unless there's something that comes up in the course of things, perhaps with, say, the architect. He might have to make more changes based on response from council. That's okay. It's just an hourly thing. So, but the builder is a long-term relationship, and it could go on, particularly these days when build times are longer. It could be 12 months. It could be more than 12 months.
And so you don't really want to be getting in a fight with your builder, because like you said, it's one of those fights that you're not likely to win. They've got a lot more...
It makes your life a misery if you're fighting with a builder for like over a 12-month period. And a lot of that's got to do with choosing well at the beginning. Some of it's got to do with your attitude to builders and how you integrate and deal with builders as well.
And that brings on that whole personal aspect, Bob, that we often talk about, being a great communicator and then understanding how your builder likes to communicate. If they're the sort of person that's coming back with one-word answers, they're just busy doing their thing, doing the do, as the people say, if they're just out there doing it, they don't want you hassling them or... I think it's imperative at the start that you realise the type of person they are. And maybe even ask them how should we communicate with this, so it's really quite clear. Because if you're a yakker and just wants to ring up and have a yarn with your builder every day, and how's it all go? That might not work for them, and then you just irritate them.
You get a good idea on the way through. So while let's say you're running a tender and you've got 3 builders quoting or whatever it happens to be, or maybe you're talking to 4 initially, you get a bit of a feel for the communication even in those early days. If they're really slow to get back and reply to a phone call, well, this is before they've even got a job, before you're, hooked up with them. If they're bad time managers, if they're really slow to get back, what's it going to be like after they're on a contract and you can't get away? They're probably going to be worse. So
there's a wee tip there worth taking home.
Yeah. So somebody that's a good communicator, happy to spend the time and explain things about their quote, for instance. Like these are before you sign a contract.
Yeah.
These are the sort of things you're looking for. I would assume that you probably had some sort of referral from somewhere. There's a reason why you approached these 3 builders. If they're in your patch, you've probably spoken to them previously about other jobs they've done in your area. Wherever they came from anyway. I assume you just didn't pluck them out of the sky. And
out of Google.
So there's some sort of pre-qualifications going on, let's say. But now we're putting them to the test. How quickly can they get back? If they say, I'll have a quote for you in 3 weeks, and in 3 weeks he says, I need another week, and at the end of that, I need another week. Well, you can imagine what it's going to be like.
Wee flag going on there.
Yeah, a bit of a flag happening there, But so that's got part of the things you do to choose a good builder. I mean, there's a whole heap of things.
Yeah, of course.
You do a whole couple of podcasts on that, but let's just assume, the dollar value's okay. They've gotten back on time with their quotes. They've been happy to explain, things you're not sure of. And that's fine. That's just at the quote stage. But then where you can actually more likely to get a bit of angst is at the contract stage. But remember, it's not a contract until you've both signed it. So you can technically walk away until you've both signed the contract. But that's when there's quite a bit of sorting out with the builder again. And this is back to communication and attitudes about a whole range of things, Like there's things you can get into, discussions that can become a little bit aggravated from time to time. It could simply be things like, look, where the problems come with builders, often around things like variations, extensions of time, anything that gives the builder an opportunity to increase the price or increase the time of construction, you don't want. So you have to obviously minimise those opportunities. But sometimes there will be times when there needs to be I'm not going to call it a heated discussion, a lively discussion. And there may be compromises that have to be made, because not every single factor necessarily can be taken into account in a building contract.
No, and we just bounced those words around prior, fair and reasonable. And think people, you have to be fair and reasonable, and you don't have to win every battle to win the war, if you were looking at it in that way. What I'm saying is you need to be flexible, can't be too hard-nosed, because like you said, your builder, they've got way more ways to get back at you than you have at them.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an adversarial thing. If it turns into that, better to walk away, and even if you have to pay a bit more for another builder. Because it's going to be a nightmare, and that, like you just said, they'll constantly be at you, and so.
Bob, how many times have you used the same builder over again and again? Like how many? What would you recommend, or do you not recommend anything? Or how many of you?
Some people think, I'll get a great builder and go, my whole development career I'll have with that one builder.
Yep.
It doesn't work out that way. The most projects I've ever done with one builder would have been probably 5, maybe 6. And
what was the reason you finished?
Well, he
after
slowly
the
got
6?
more expensive and not competitive anymore.
So what was his reason for that?
Well,
did he grow, or what was the story?
He did grow.
Yep.
When I actually carried him when I met him, he was on the tools.
Yep.
And he wanted to get off the tools. So what that means is a builder who isn't just the licensed builder for a job, but he's often out there. If he was a carpenter, he might be helping and working with the framers, putting the frame up, and maybe at the fit out. You know, he couldn't help himself. He came up as a carpenter.
Yep.
Often builders that come through the trades, like a carpenter, or even a bricklayer sometimes, particularly carpenter, they love to get on the tools. And when they start off, they might be on the tools. So they just start off small, a one-man band, home office, a ute. And so in order to
that's how to get started
make
building
their money, they're also working on the tools. So they're sort of like drawing a salary off the tools, but they're the builder, so they make a builder's margin. But if they want to step up and become a bigger builder, then they've got to get off the tools. They've got to become more of a building manager. I think it still operate from home, but they might get a few building contracts going where they're not on the tools. They just have subcontractors. And then they might be doing their own inspections, but then when they get a couple of more projects to build, they might start to get in a building supervisor. And they can grow like that. Well, that's what this builder wanted to do. So first thing I did, you've got to get off the tools, we've got to get you off the tools. And you need to get step up, get an office. He wanted to do a number of projects at a time. And he was doing some other projects for other people as well. And that was fine. I got introduced to that builder by a developer mate of mine as well. But we got him to a point. Now, it was okay. It was good for a while, but one of his problems was he kept using the exact same subcontractors all the time because they were mates.
The old relationships.
He couldn't separate his business from his friendships. So he'd be out playing golf or going fishing with the plumber drainer and this other guy's his best mate and his second best mate. And they just started thinking, well, every time they quote a job for him, they're going to get it because they're mates. And they'd be putting their prices up.
Right.
And it came to a point where he said, look, I'm going to do a job. Was one, he said, I'll do a really tight price. And I said, well, your prices have been like getting out there a bit. And it didn't work at all. And I said, is that the best you can do? He said, look, I'm only making like a 5% margin. And I said, well, show me open your books up. And I could tell that like some of these subcontract prices were really high. And I got another builder I was sort of talking to at the time. And I said, look, I'm happy to do it because you probably can just give us a bust up. And I was comparing like the plumbing draining prices of him, the plastering, across at the other subcontractors. And every one of this builder's subcontractors was right up there. And I could see, he probably wasn't, he probably did have a 5% margin for himself, but the other guys are ripping into him. But anyway, that's getting off subject a bit, but builders can get a bit high.
So Bob, another thing we have heard, noticed and seen is just, especially over recent times with the increase in materials, so builders and just that slowing down, some builders have almost been caught a wee bit with their pants down.
Oh, some have, and a number of builders have gone broke too.
Yeah, so if you're in that case, what do you suggest people do if they're dealing with a builder right now and that's happened to them? So the builder's probably likely trying to do, finding ways to claw back money, finding ways to add variations to get more money. What would be your advice on that?
Well, I'll take it one step back and say, give yourself the minimum opportunity for variations, a variation being an opportunity for a builder to change a price. No prime cost items, no provisional sum items, a really detailed specification, detail every item, the brand, the model number, do all of that, detailed design plans. So that's what you need to do to give minimum opportunity to vary. But if it was a lump sum fixed price contract, which is what the banks love, financiers love, then yes, they probably would have loaded a bit of fat in at the beginning to cope with some increases, but perhaps not enough. And now, as soon as they realise their profit margins are being eroded, they'll look for every opportunity, like you just said, to get money back or to extend the length of the contract. So a really tight contract to begin with limits it. It becomes a situation where they'll shoot for variations, even though they may not technically be able to claim them under the contract.
That's why you really need to be over your contract, eh?
You need to
know what's in it.
You need to know what's in your contract, which comes back to getting the best contract you can at the beginning. What I mean by the best contract, it still has to be fair.
Yeah.
A fair contract is a good contract.
Yeah, exactly.
Things like, and I'll get back to that subject, but liquidated damages.
Yeah.
How much the builder has to pay you for every day goes over time. It has to be reasonable. It has to be enough to make the builder not want to go over time. But don't get into a big fight about it, because what will happen if you try and increase that too much, they'll just increase the length of the build so that they never get to a point of going over time. So if you keep pushing too hard, if a fair amount's $150 a day for every day they go over time, and you're pushing for $350, and it's a big argument, they'll just say, well, it's no longer
at a month.
Well, or 3.
Yeah.
So that it will never happen. And then now you've got a long contract that you didn't really want. But you might have been better just going back to a realistic liquidated damages and not try and work the builder over, who ultimately can, and they'll be looking for all sorts of opportunities to extend time. So it's got to be fair. If it's fair and reasonable at the beginning, and both parties are fair and reasonable, it'll be a good project. So back to those lump sum fixed price contracts, and it can happen that some builders are being caught, and some builders have come back to people and asked them to tip in a bit extra. Now I'll tell you what you don't want to happen. You don't want a builder to go broke, because that's one of the worst things that can happen to you. Really, it costs you money when a builder goes broke. You don't want to go there. So you don't want to just tip a builder in, or just be so hard that they end up. It's easier for them just to wind it up than to, lose money. And so there might be a little bit of give and take. Maybe there's a few extra costs that you have to share, even though you technically might not need to.
Well, that just happened to me.
Yeah, on your project.
And that I was fully okay with that. A great relationship with the builder. He was very honest and upfront, very impacted by what's gone on.
He showed you his costs, everything he'd quoted on, stuff that nobody anticipated that would have gone where it went.
And just ask, would you pay that?
Yeah, and he's wearing a fair bit of those costs himself, but he just asks you if you, and fair and reasonable. So the good relationship continues. The project is a good project. It's a profitable project, and it will continue because the relationship's there. Yeah. And so
and long may it last.
Long may it last.
Yeah.
But it's that fine balance with a builder, getting a good builder, a good price, a contract that's fair, but doesn't give a lot of opportunity for either one to take advantage of the other. The thing is about contracts, taking one step back, because we're talking about fixed price contracts. Some markets are builders' markets.
Yes.
And some markets aren't. We talk about buyers' markets and sellers' markets in real estate. If there's lots of building construction going on, builders are really busy. We know that, their margins will be higher, the subbies' margins will be higher and that sort of thing. But they can pick and choose their contracts. So it's harder to negotiate a contract that's, and sometimes even 50-50 fair. Reasonable builders with reasonable people will still come up with a decent contract, and there's a lot you can do to get a good workable contract that works with both parties.
I mean, in an ideal world, everyone's happy with the outcome, and nobody's not happy. And sometimes if you're talking about when it's not a builder's time, if they go in too low because they're desperate for work. That is not a good scenario.
No. When there's not a lot of construction on, you'll have a lot more competition. But if you were to get 4 prices from 3 or 4 builders, and one, 3 of them, let's say 4.
You just said this recently, eh? One came in really low. You're like,
3 are around the same price, and one's boom right down there. I'd be seriously worried about that one that's really low.
Yeah. Another great tip there, everybody.
Yeah. I mean, if 3 are around the same, then that's probably around the right money. And then you look at a range of things, not just dollar value. It's how long.
Yeah.
Someone's going to build in 8 months. Someone is going to build in 12. That's all. You can work out the interest rate difference, and it might be better off going not with the cheapest one. It's going to cost you less in build cost and more in interest. So there's lots of components to that. But back to the relationship side, I think it gets back to what you said before about right at the beginning about good communication, good open lines of communication.
But not just, I think that's number one is the open lines, but also finding out how they like to communicate. Yeah, like if they like to keep, obviously you need to be updated, but if they want to chat to you, then that's okay. But if they're not a chatter, I mean, we all know when we're on the phone with that person who won't stop talking, and you're just thinking you're wasting your own life away here.
Yeah, so if you're not far from your patch, you can do weekly or fortnightly meetings on site, which you should do. Or get someone else to do it for you, but you should be doing those, and that's fine. But there'll be occasions in between where the builder needs to know things.
Yes.
Called an RFI, for further information. They just want to know, request for further information, and that's okay. They might.
I didn't know the acronym. I got further information. I was like, "What's the R?" In my head, I'm sitting there. Was anyone else listening to it thinking, "What's Bob talking about?" RFI.
I jumped over it a bit. But request for further information, and so that'll be in between those sorts of talks and discussions. It might be that you can't get that particular type of underbench oven that you've specified, but there's another one that's just as good. Would you be happy with that? It could be a simple conversation like that. There might be no variation in price. Well, that's okay. That's cool. That's a pretty quick one.
What's been your worst experience, Bob? What have you had actually, I do know you have. What's been an experience that wasn't good and you've managed to turn it around? Let's go there. Like with a builder, you've had
the hardest time I've ever had with a builder, I've had 2 builders go broke on me. Yeah,
and just explain for people listening what that means, because that's not good.
Well, it's not good when a builder goes broke during the construction. I'd probably rather them go broke on the first day or the last day. But a third of the way through or half the way through,
ouch!
It's not good because. There's a whole legal process you have to go through to basically cancel the contract, which then enables you to enter into a new contract with another builder.
And that builder usually is a little bit nervous about what the other builder's done, aren't they?
It's going to be more expensive.
Yep.
They've got to take over the quality of the other builder, basically. You've got to take over
of the prior work done.
All the prior work done, yeah. So, and if a builder's been going broke, he might have been cutting corners. So they got to, you got to have a really strong audit. The builder, the quantity surveyor. Anyway, that could be a podcast in its own. But getting back to it, the builder was obviously, and it wasn't his only project. I heard he was actually profitable enough on our project, but there was another 2 or 3 that weren't.
Right.
And so collectively, he's sort of going backwards. And so he was trying to use every opportunity he could to get money out of us. And often for things that contractually he couldn't, but he was just trying to bluff us all the time. And so it was a constant fight until he finally went broke. And we had to get legal opinions in there. We had very strong contract law contacts. But every time he questioned it, we'd have to respond. Well, to do it properly, we responded via our contract law specialist as to why that he can't claim that, or he can't claim that much. Or it was just a constant battle until he finally went, and then we had to replace him, and then replaced him with on 2 occasions they were replaced with other builders that I knew. Yeah. Even though they were more expensive and, there's a bit of a delay and there's legal things involved. But then it was okay. Although,
Bob, how stressful is that scenario when your builder's going broke? What's that like for the developer? Well, you think he's going.
Well, first of all, you don't know why he's trying to grab money from everywhere, but then that's a big red flag. Yeah. But it's like you're constantly in battle. Yeah. You're constantly getting hit with variations of all sorts and arguments of all sorts. So the project management side from the developer's point of view is no joy. it'd be like a marriage going bad, constant bickering and fighting. It's a bit like that, I guess. So...
toilet seat up, toilet seat down sort of scenario.
Yeah, so that's been my toughest times. It's that.
But could you see it happening? Like when it started, did you think, here we go? At what point, after a heat, looking back, how long did it take you to realise what was happening?
Well, I was starting to get hints from the quantity surveyor who they hear rumours in the market.
Right.
Because the quantity surveyors are going to lots and lots of projects every month for financiers, and so they're dealing with lots of builders. And quite often, it starts with subcontractors not getting paid.
Whispering.
And so they're chasing the developer for money, but not paying the subbies.
Right.
And so the subbies complain immediately. What the subbies usually do is go straight to the financier or the quantity surveyor and start saying, hey, we're not getting paid. If they go to the financier, and it's not hard to work out who the financier is, even from a subcontractor's point of view, because all they have to do is a $20 title search and the financier will be registered first mortgagee.
Right.
They contact them. The first thing then the financier starts to ring up the developer, he rings up the quantity surveyor to start checking things out, what's going on, or sometimes another indication is a builder's getting paid monthly and then he starts asking for fortnightly payments on the way through. That doesn't necessarily mean it, but it generally means they're suffering for cash flow.
Yeah. So if that happened to you, if somebody did start asking to, improve their cash flow by paying fortnightly, would you go with that, Bob?
I'd want to know why.
But would you? And if you knew why?
Not necessarily, because firstly, the financier might simply say no.
Right.
The deal is, monthly, and that's that. The contract's monthly.
Yeah.
So your contract with them is that they get paid monthly. So, but your loan with the bank is that it gets paid monthly.
Yeah.
So, even if you agreed, you and the builder being the two parties on the contract, the financier probably wouldn't. In fact, that would be a big red flag for a financier, and not one you want. I do know a builder, and a very good one, and a very solid builder, who actually gets paid fortnightly and not monthly.
That's in his contracts?
Right from the beginning.
Is that a cash flow issue thing?
It's never an issue. He's not short of money.
Cash
this guy.
flow requirement.
It helps his cash flow.
Yeah.
And he said the benefit for me is I can get really good subcontractors at a better price because I can pay them basically weekly instead of monthly, and they know it's safe because they finished the week and they got paid. And he said, and I'm happy to pass that on. He said, because I can really run my business really well with fortnightly payments.
Is that why you do it too? You pay your bills immediately?
I just pay, if the money's there, I just pay it to get it out of the way. I don't like, bunches of invoices lying around.
No.
But that's an example of a builder who gets paid fortnightly. But you know that from day one, and you know why. And the financier's okay. If they know why from day one, and obviously it has to be a builder that's got a good track record and they stack up as that particular builder does, it's okay.
So let's pull this one into an end, Bob. I think what we've sort of realised, and we could summarise to, number one, you don't always take the cheapest builder. Number two, it's all about the relationship.
Yep.
And have a great relationship with your builder. Number three, look out for the red flags.
Yeah, and I guess in there is you both need to be winning. The builder needs to stay liquid and make a fair profit, and you do too as a developer. Yeah.
So there's no point being hard-nosed. It needs to be a win-win situation when things, before they get really bad, if you're interacting well, you'll all work together to make things happen well.
Yeah, and most of it's sorted out at the contract stage.
Yeah.
It's only things that change during the build that can, beyond that, create dramas.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for your wisdom and vital tips there. If you're interested in education with us, check out propertymastermind.com.au. And if you'd like to win a copy of our book, subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us some love. I think that's it, Bob.
That was a good one. I enjoyed that.
Happy Australia Day if you're listening.
Happy Australia Day, everybody.
Happy Australia Day.
Hope your cockroach won.
I'm off to the beach.
No cockies there.
All right. Bye.
See ya.